Well, thank you everyone for coming here at Malaprops, and thank you guys that are here virtually. Before we begin, I just want to say Zuko's redemption arc.
I know.
The best redemption arc ever.
I am looking to write a book that makes me feel the way that made me feel. I haven't achieved it yet. Don't lie to me. I have not achieved it yet. But one day, because that...
It is the best narrative of a villain becoming a good person ever.
Yeah,
really, in my opinion. I also named one of my 3 dogs Zuko.
Oh, one of my best friends is a cat named Zuko, and I exclusively call him Zuzu.
Oh, nice, nice. So we are here to celebrate the debut of Kamilah's book, So Let Them Burn, which has been pitched as Jamaican Joan of Arc with dragons, which is super, super cool. And it's only been out for 2 days. It actually came out on my birthday. So happy birthday to me.
Happy birthday!
So it was such a great read, and I was so happy that I was able to read it beforehand. Tell us about your publishing journey and how this book came to be.
My publishing journey. So I have wanted to be published since I was a very, very young child, and I was determined to make it happen. So I would research agents and self-addressed sealed envelopes, which is how we had to send queries back before the internet was a thing. And I would like write these query letters that I was going to send out. And you will notice that I did not mention writing any books, because I did not. The query letters were for books that do not exist. I never wrote them. But yeah, I was just really enamored with the idea of being published, but writing was hard, guys. It's still hard, guys. So I didn't actually finish a book until I was like 27. And it was for Nano, and it was terrible. And I was like,
But Nano books are allowed to be terrible.
It was really terrible. Like, I am not, like, it was just a complete ripoff of the Gentleman Bastard series by Scott Lynch, except that they were teenagers and they were assassins instead of thieves. That can't ever see the light of day. So I was like, I did it once, let's see if I can do it again. And so I did that like 3 more times, and then 2018 rolled around and Zendaya appeared at the Met Gala dressed as Joan of Arc. And I was like, I mean, I've always loved the story of Joan of Arc, but that was the first time I had the idea that Joan of Arc could like be Black. And I was like, actually, if you think about it, her story of trying to liberate France from England makes a lot more sense if it is like a Black woman trying to liberate her colonized island, like Jamaica, from England. And so the story just kind of started to unspool from there. But so the thing about writing is that's just the first part. You have to edit the book after that. And I had never done that before in my life. So that took me 2 years and 39 drafts to edit this book into something that I felt comfortable sending to people. And so I did PitMat, which is a Twitter pitching contest where you have to distill your book down to like 1 line and hope that agents pay attention. And I pitched it and it did really well. And then I was like, I am going to be such a big deal. And I sent out my queries and I got rejected. and then I got rejected again and again and again and again and again. And I was like, I can only write a pitch. Like, I can't do the execution. Like, I was fully laying face down on the floor, crying. I was telling my best friend, what if I just quit writing, move to the mountains, like, let's just stop this pipe dream. And like, I entered Author Mentor Match, which is a mentoring contest where you submit your manuscript and a writer, an established writer, tries to come on to mentor you to get it ready for querying. And I didn't get in. And I was like, I can only write a pitch. I'm super good at pitching, but the execution, it sucks. I am gonna quit writing. I hate it here. I'm not special. And then like 2 weeks later, I got an agent offer. It's like they heard me being like so whiny and were like, shut up, here's your offer. And I ended up signing with Emily Forney. at Bookends Literary, who is my favorite person in the whole world and also my greatest enemy in the whole world. Emily, I know you're watching. I don't like you. And she's just been amazing. She saw a huge potential in my book. She understood my book on the level that only a Black woman could understand my book. And we ended up selling it to little brown young readers. And now
here you are.
Now it's a book. So don't quit writing and move to the mountains, guys. Because clearly we just have to stick it out and be persistent.
And that's part of publishing. It takes one person to believe in you. It takes one person to say that yes and say, I like this book, or let's do something with it. So that's so awesome that Emily was your yes.
She was my yes. Like after 50 no's, she was my yes. And honestly, like it really just does take one person. It's just, you never know how long it'll take to find that one person. So you gotta stick it out.
Well, that's an awesome story. I had read about the Zendaya dress, that you had said that in an interview, and I think that's a really cool inspiration.
She's so cool.
One of the things because I've read the book and I love it, and as you pitched it is, Joan of Arc with dragons. And when I was reading your dragons, I thought they were amazing. The way that I noticed some dragon lore from other places and how you incorporated it. And I thought they were so cool. And as a huge fantasy author and reader, I love a good dragon story. And I really liked how you did yours. Can you talk a little bit about your inspiration for your dragons?
Yeah, so I've always loved dragons too. I went from like watching Dragon Tales to, reading Aragon and then watching the terrible Aragon movie. I would read like Patricia C. Reed's Dealing with Dragons and all of those books. Basically, if it had dragons in it, like I would be all over it. So I've always loved dragons, and I've noticed that when it comes to dragon books, there's so many different ways to do it. They could be massive enough to ride or small enough to be on your shoulder, or they can like talk or not talk. They can turn into people, or they just bond with people. Like there are a lot of things to do. My favorite kinds of dragons are the dragons that you bond with. And I probably would have done a straightforward story like Aragon did with the dragons if I hadn't watched a movie called Pacific Rim.
That's the influence I noticed. I was like, that was like Pacific Rim is here.
That was such a huge influence on this, because like it was a specific influence on the book as a whole, because before I had just wanted to write a book about giant metal dragons, and then Pacific Rim had like Jaegers, which are like these giant metal creature things, and they are fighting kaiju, which are these monsters that are coming from, guess what, the Pacific Rim. And so that's when I was like, what if the giant metal dragons were fighting biological dragons? And the story came together like that. But with Pacific Rim, to pilot a Jaeger, you need to be drift compatible with somebody else. And the different kinds of relationships, like there are three brothers who are piloting a Jaeger. There are like these two friends who are piloting a Jaeger, father and son. Like it just is, there's just something about them, like their minds that are able to work together in that way. So when I was going to my dragon bonds, I was like, well, dragons are huge. Like they're really, really big. So it'd probably be weirder in my head if like only one person could bond with a mind and a soul of that size. So that's when I had the idea of each dragon has to have two writers. And so in my book, each dragon has to have two writers. The first one's called the wing leader, and the first writer. The first one's called the first writer, and they're the one who does like most of the dragon back piloting, like the more active combatant. And then the second one is called the wing leader, and they're like the more passive strategic one, and their souls have to be compatible with each other and with the dragon. So suffice to say, finding two writers for a dragon is very, very difficult. At the time that the story opens, all the dragons are bonded or dead, except for Zafira, who has her first writer, but she has yet to find her wing leader. And spoiler alert, not a spoiler because it is literally in the descriptive copy of the book, she finds one in Alara, who is one of the main characters of the book. So Pacific Rim was a huge influence. And then Aragon, because Aragon had different dragons that were different colors, presumably different breeds. It's been a while since I've read Aragon, so please don't come for me. But I just remember thinking like, what color dragon and like what kind of power would that dragon have. Like I have a series Bible with a giant page of the dragon lore in my book, and like not even 1% of that page made it into the final version of So Let Them Burn because my editor made me cut like 15K.
Wow.
I really love dragons.
Well, I'm glad I got to ask you about dragons. So one of the things that you were talking about is the relationships of the writers and the dragon and the writers to each other. And that's one of the great things that I think you do in the book is the relationships between the 4, 5, 6 main characters. And the 2 main characters, it's a dual point of view book. So you have Farron, who is one sister, and then Alara is the other sister, and they're the 2 different POVs that go through the book. Why did you choose to make them sisters and that relationship to explore?
So that actually came about by accident because at first this was solely Farron's story. So I just wanted to write like a Black Joan of Arc, and that's what I was doing. And then I was like, let me expand the world a little bit. So Farron had a friend who also had a POV. Her name was Darcy, and then her name was Darcy. And then another POV was Reeves, but at the time his name was Gael, which is super funny if you've read the book. Yes. Super funny if you've read the book. And like went on and on like that. And then I was like, there is no way that any parent in their right mind would let Farron go off to war, no matter what gods said that was okay. So I gave her an older sister who was in her late 20s, and like her parents were like, you can go, but only if you take your sister and she watches you like a guardian. And that worked for like a couple, like 15 drafts. And then I was like, there is no way, even with your older sister, that your parents would let you go off to war. Like, no matter how old you are still your parents' baby. They're not going to be like, yeah, if you go with my 29-year-old, then it's fine.
Well, if you grew up in the 80s.
Yes, but so yeah, that's when Alara came in, and she was like in her late 20s, and it wasn't working. So I aged her down and decided that what they did instead was sneak out while their parents were asleep. And then by the time their parents woke up, they were long gone. They didn't know how to find them. They didn't know where they were. So, that added attention to their relationship with their parents, because now they're like constantly checking on them in the middle of the night, making sure they're still in their beds, that kind of thing. So the sisterly relationship came late. But once I put that together, and started to think about how Farron and Alara relate to each other, I realized that this was the story I wanted to tell. Before, I was telling the story of Joan of Arc, but this Alara and Farron and how much they love each other and what they would do for each other, this was my book. And that's how I put my own personal touch on it, because, I'm an older sister myself, and I have a great relationship with my younger sister. So I was able to pull a lot from that, even though Farron and Alara are nothing like us. I want to be clear. nothing like us. So yeah, the sisterly bond was late, but it became completely integral to the story.
I could really tell that the sisterly bond, I am the youngest of 4, and I have 2 older sisters and an older brother. And when one of the quotes that really struck me was when Alara was, from her point of view, was saying that she had always lived in her sister's shadow, and kind of had that resentment. As the youngest of 4, I was always living in other people's shadows. And that really struck a chord with me when I was reading her. I thought that was a great line and a real great example of how you built that sisterly relationship.
Yeah, for sure. I think that the thing about being the youngest, not that Alara is the youngest, but the thing about being the youngest is that everything that you might do has been done before you. And younger or older sibling, you tend to define yourself by your sibling, because it's either they already did this, so you have to do it, or they already did this, so you refuse to do it and try to strike.
Or they already did it and screwed it up.
Or they already did it,
and
now you're not allowed to do it. And then as the older sibling, you're I am they've never had a kid before, they're trying everything out on you, and then you get to watch as your younger sibling earns the what mistakes your parents made with you they don't make with your younger sibling, so you suffered this and they got to avoid it, and so you're just so bitter about it. So yeah, I think inherently sibling relationships tend to be full of a lot of resentment, but that doesn't stop you from being close and loving each other so fiercely. And there's a complexity there that I really love playing with.
Yeah, and I really enjoyed that part of the novel. And as you said, like there's a complexity of sibling relationships, and my brother is one of my best friends. So yeah, so that part of the book really struck a chord with me. And then speaking of Farron and Alara, your book is dual point of view, and this one of the things that is really difficult that you pulled off so well was that you had Farron's point of view, and then the next chapter you had Alara, and then the next chapter you had Farron, and you switched throughout. And there, at a point, I was like, okay, Farron, and then I was like, no, Alara, I want to stick with Farron, and then I would read Alara, and then I'd be like, wait a minute, no, we gotta go back to Farron. But now I'm invested in Alara. And it really kept the tension. And it was really great. So you talked about this a little bit, but you said Reeve had a point of view at one point, but you narrowed it down to just those two. Was that just for length? Was that just, that's the story you were telling? And then how did you structure it? Because that's a hard structure to do.
So Reeve, he had a point of view, and the reason that I ended up cutting Darcy, because sorry. So Reeve is still the son of the leader of the Langley Empire, and Darcy was the ward, so like his adopted sister kind of, and she is the one who switched sides during the war to become Farron's best friend now. And I was like, they don't need to be two separate characters. So that's when it became like Alara, Farron, Reeve, because he's the one who switched sides during the war. But then I just realized that Reeve didn't have a story to tell. Like Farron was dealing with, PTSD and her terrible decisions, and like wanting to save her sister and her even more terrible decisions. And then Alara was bonding with a dragon and then going off to dragon school and then, spying and doing it really badly. But Reeve, he had no forward movement that was just his own. Everything that was going on in his chapters was directly related to save Alara or help Farron. He had no personal stake that was interesting for me to follow. So I ended up cutting his POV, and I think that made the story stronger because, the mystery of who he is and what he thinks, and Farron's very suspicious of him. So I've had a few early readers that were like, I don't know if I can trust him or not. And I'm just like, was a lot more fun to play with. And then as for the structure, I always like stories that go back and forth, but it's really down to my editor, to Alex Hightower, who really helped me. At first, Alara and Farron's storylines just completely split in the middle, and they did not speak to each other again until the end of the book. But it was Alex who was like, how about Alara finds this out, and then they fire call, and that information Farron takes and runs with that. So it really helped with the tension and leaving everything on a cliffhanger of who knows what and who's doing what. So that was entirely my editor. You can thank her for that or hate her, I don't know.
No, it was really effective in keeping the tension going. And editors are the best.
So the best.
They're so good.
So good. This book was a completely different thing before Alex got a hold of it.
So you have really four main characters. You have Farron and Alara, who is kind of the sisters, and then you have Reeve, the best friend. And then you have Signe Soto. I would burn the world for Signe. I love her. And one of the great things that the book highlights is not only the sisterly relationship, but you have romantic relationships and you have friendship relationships. So can you talk about how the four main characters kind of move together throughout the book?
Yeah, so it's kind of like an interconnected web, because Farron and Alara are sisters. Alara's best friend is Reeve. Farron hates Reeve. And then there's Signy, who comes in kind of late.
Hates everyone.
She hates everyone. It's kind of her personality. But she and Alara become co-writers of the same dragon. And then later in the book, Signy and Farron meet for reasons. And then, you know, Signy has opinions about Reeve because Reeve's kind of infamous for being like a freaking traitor, but like in a good way. So the four of them kind of have like these interconnected relationships that kind of become like more that in book two by book two. But I think that like for me personally, like friendships are more important to me than like anything else. I mean, I'm single, and I just don't prioritize romances in my life. It's my friends who hold me down. It's my friends who, if I need a hug or a cuddle or like a kind word, you know. So the second best, like most prominent relationship in the book is the friendship between Alara and Reeve, who are like so close and would also burn down the world for each other. And then the romantic relationships are like third and fourth. But I did try to put as much depth into all of the relationships as I could, because I feel like, you know, it doesn't matter what kind of love it is, that like every human being needs love in their life. And it can be the love of your family, it can be the love of your friends, like maybe it's a romantic love, but as long as like you are a human being in this world who is loved, I think you're better off than like anybody else, really, because that's really, the book is about different kinds of love and war.
Yes, it is about love and war. Speaking of the war, so the book takes place after the war. So there's this big war, and then that Farron and Alara kind of sneak off to and do their thing. But the book takes place after the war is over and they're both home, and that's when it starts. So was that, because I've written a book that starts at the end.
So this is ever after.
And it's an interesting place to start, because it's not the story that happened before, it's the story that's happening now. So what led you to kind of not skip the war part, but kind of pick up where it's at peacetime?
A couple of things. So, like I said, I've always been fascinated by the story of Joan of Arc, who, for anyone who doesn't know, she went to war when she was 13 years old, hearing the voices of what she claimed were angels who told her to go and help free France from England. And she was burned at the stake when she was 19. So she never left her teens. And I just remember thinking, like, when I saw Zendaya at the Met Gala, I was like, if she had lived, you know, would she still be hearing voices? Would she still feel that she had a purpose? Like, if she had lived long enough to see her country liberated, like, what do you do then? You know, you were called for this like thing that's so much bigger than yourself, and it's over, and you're still only like 19. Like, what do you do after that? So I knew that like that's the angle that I wanted to take on that story. And then a couple of things happened, which was Strange the Dreamer by Laini Taylor. I read that. It is a book about the aftermath of war, and the trauma, and the trauma, and then the trauma. And I just thought that was so incredibly clever, the way that Laini did that, the way that she, you know, like describe those complicated feelings on both sides between like the two countries and how they hurt each other, or not countries, the two species and how they hurt each other. And then there's this song by Stars. It's called In Our Bedroom After the War, and it killed me. I listened to that song on a loop while writing this book, because it's just like it's just this beautiful, beautiful song about like, you know, you hearing the birds and like being in your room and like, what do you do now? Because the war is over, and like, yay, it's over, but like, God, it's over. So I like the idea of playing with those ideas. Like, my marketing team once asked me, like, would you write a prequel that's set during the war? And I told them, like, no, I wouldn't, because the point of my book is not the war that happened, because there's always a war that happens. It's how you pick up and how you heal from a war, because that's the part that like is so much harder and takes so much longer than winning any random war. It's like, how do you find your normal again after living through one? So, I mean, to write a prequel about the war, I feel would just cheapen it, because the real fight is what's going on inside you, you know?
And I think you did an excellent job of portraying that.
Thank you. I'm really bad at complimenting.
I complimented her earlier, she ran away.
I literally ran away.
And I was like, what did I do?
I literally, like, every friend I have that's watching this right now is like, yeah, that's Kamilah. I physically hid from you.
You did. And I don't even remember what I said. I think it was about the dragon. I said something about how I
You were
love.
like, the dragon, your dragon lore is just so beautiful and complex and rich. And I was like, shut up.
And she turned and ran.
And FT was like, I'm just a person, because I have been fangirling them since they picked me up from the hotel. I feel like I am in a car with FT Lukens. And so they were like, I am just a person. And I was like, this isn't about you.
I picked Kyle up from the hotel and we were driving through downtown Asheville and we were just kind of chatting because it's the first time we had met and chatting, and she looks at me, she goes, do you realize you have to look?
I'm in a car with FT Lukens. And then they just hand me an arc of their next book. And I was like, am I supposed to not cry right now? We're friends now. I'm past it. But when I ran away from their compliment, they thought I was dumb. And I was like, no, you're saying nice things about me and I can't handle it. Now y'all know our business.
So as you know, we don't get along at all.
Yeah, no, I can't stand them. It's fine.
No. Actually, it was funny because we just started talking about the same exact thing.
Yeah.
And we're like, oh, we're best friends.
Yeah, we're best friends now.
So
after that tangent.
So that after that very beautiful talk about the war, and then our little breakdown, if readers could take one thing away from So Let Them Burn, what would be the message that you would want them to have?
Imperialism is bad. Imperialism is very bad. It hurts the countries that are being colonized. It hurts the colonizer. I think that you need to know, when you read my book, I am saying with every word, every line, every joke, that imperialism is bad. That's the message. Like, I cannot stress that enough. I just think that, you know, I mean, I was talking about this yesterday too, but you know, all the cultures that have been snuffed out, all of the animals that went from endangered to extinct, all of the resources that have been completely used up or like are only in the hands of a very small few billionaires. Like, this world is not a world that was meant to be conquered. It's a world that was meant to be shared, to be enjoyed, to be explored, you know? And I just think that like the moment it turned into something where it's like something that like you have to claim your piece of, that's just where we went wrong as a civilization. And I just really wrote this book to kind of show that like there are so many cultures that are so beautiful and like could have been even more beautiful if they had never been colonized, and are still beautiful because they managed to, you know, find themselves and overcome the things that they've been through. But like, imperialism is bad. And I hope that you can read So Let Them Burn and just like think of your own culture or think of your own home place, and while you can join me in, you know, grieving something that never was, you know, the way your country could have been if it had never been colonized, that you like remember the beauty of it too, and your own resilience in your own lives. Because yeah, this is a book that's just meant to empower, really. Hopefully.
No, it's wonderful. It really is.
Thank you.
Just everyone remember online and in the store to think of questions, because we are about halfway through. So if you have any questions, make sure to get them in so that we can ask them all those. So you've already mentioned some of your creative inspirations. You mentioned Pacific Rim. Pacific Rim, and you mentioned some dragon books. Is there any other inspirations or any media that you love that kind of snuck its way in or anything like that?
So Fury Born by Claire Legrand was a huge inspiration on this book, particularly the relationship between the Riel and Angel's name. Oh my God, I've forgotten. So Riel has like a mind link with an angel who's like, do this thing for me. I'm totally not evil. And she's like, I don't know about that. Which kind of describes Farron's relationship with another character that I can't mention to a T. So Corian. Riel and Corian from Fury Born were a huge inspiration on the book, and also Star Wars, actually, because the prequel trilogy, for all of its quality problems, gave me my favorite character, who is Anakin Skywalker. And I just really, really loved the way that he, started as the greatest hero prophesized to come. And then, like, because of his own personal flaws and, the flaws of the society that he was in, like the Jedi Society, and, his fears of loss and like his very understandable mental problems, led to him doing nothing wrong ever in his entire life. I say, of a man who literally like slaughtered the Jedi children, but the younglings, yes. He's done nothing wrong. I am an Anakin Skywalker apologist. He was also a huge inspiration for a character who is a spoiler from the book, in the sense that, he started as a hero and then, he really fell far to the point where he became like legendary for how far that he fell. So yeah, I think those are
I think Star Wars finds its way into everything I write.
Yeah.
It's so influential for just my writing and for folks that kind of grew up with Star Wars. And for even for me, it's always been here. And one of the first movies I saw in the theater was Return of the Jedi.
Oh, nice.
When I was very little. Just throwing that out there. Very, very small. I don't really remember it. I remember the Ewoks though.
Oh yeah, the Ewoks.
Yeah,
little teddy bears.
But even like in Spellbound, Antonia is kind of an Obi-Wan, where she had an apprentice that she thought she could, do great things with, and that apprentice just kind of went the wrong way. Became an Anakin.
Became an Anakin who has done nothing wrong ever in his entire life. But yeah, I really like that. I think that Star Wars is just one of those things where, like, even if you're not really into it, like, it does like the hero's journey so well. And like it takes these archetypes that are so familiar to people and really does something new and interesting with them that I think is so cool to
and it has become an archetype, you know, like you can have a character and read that and be like, that's a Han Solo character, you know, or that's a
rebel princess. There's your Leia.
Like, yeah, that's a Leia. And for a long time, for folks like me, like Leia was the woman in sci-fi, you know, and that was like the Princess Leia was who, little girls wanted to be when they grew up. So this is your debut. That's so exciting. Is there anything that's been like surprising so far in this whole process? Is there anything that has taken you by surprise? Anything exciting that's happened? Well, I know you had your big launch.
I did have my big launch. It was really, really great because a lot more people came than I ever realized that I knew or thought would come. And I got to wear like my favorite jumpsuit and it looked really cute. Thank you. And I got a lot of flowers. I think that's probably what's been the most surprising for me because, when you're writing, it's just such a solitary, it's such a solitary thing. The story's just yours and you have no idea how it's going to be received, but you have the story inside you and you need to get it out. And so when it's out and you just expect like I mean, I did that, so I care. So it's really, really cool to see who ends up showing up for you, who ends up being there, who ends up being excited. I still get a jump scare every time I see someone talking about my book, because it's just been my thing, you know, for so long. So I think I just was really surprised by how many people found it in their hearts to give my little book a chance. I don't think I'll ever stop being surprised about that. Because this has been my dream for so long. And when a dream comes true, you know, it's usually like almost a bittersweet time, because yay, but also like the possibilities that you could have dreamed of when it hadn't happened yet. Like, you definitively have an answer to how this dream is going to be like, you know, and that could be really, really great and really, really sad at the same time. The sadness is not yet kicked in for me, because so far this has been, the fact that anyone is here right now is just beyond my wildest imagining. So yeah, just thank you to everyone who is giving me and my book a chance. And thank you, FT, for liking it. I really appreciate it.
Well, and I think with writing and achieving your goals in publishing, it's always that like next step and that next goal. And sometimes you can get so buried in that and forget to like look up and be like, oh yes, this book is out. And you can walk to a bookstore and you can pick it up and people are going to buy it and read it and enjoy it. And it's so cool. But then also in your brain, you're like, okay, what's the next step? What is the next goal?
Yeah.
And sometimes that can be overwhelming, but just, you know, your debut is great, and it's and enjoy it, please enjoy it. So you've already talked about all your drafts and everything and your writing. So when you're writing, are you a plotter? Are you a pantser? Are you a kind of a both? I am a plotter to the dialogue.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's
do.
deep.
Yeah, I have to. That's the way my brain works.
No, I love that.
And I'll get to that. If I don't do that, then I'll get to the middle and like that kind of middle slog, and you're like, what is happening? What is supposed to be going on?
I always have like a strong start and then like a good idea of the ending, and then I get to the middle and I'm like, what do you mean I need like 50,000 more words of what? But yeah, I am a planter, because I usually like, I come up with the idea and then I look up the word counts of other books similar in the genre. And then I take the average of those word counts. And then I divide the word count by 2,500 words, because that's roughly how long my chapters tend to be when I write them. And that tells me how many chapters this book needs to be. And then I write a chapter plan that fills out that many chapters. Stop looking at me like this.
No, that's great. I'm taking notes.
Yeah. Because I feel like that really helps me with pacing, because like instead of not knowing like when the book's going to be over, I know exactly how many chapters and so what should kind of happen where. But then I will write this great chapter plan, and then I will get in there and start that chapter, and we're off the rails already. Like, I love the discovery aspect of writing the chapter, but I love having a guide, because I'm like, all right, I don't know how they ended up in this alley in an almost kiss while somebody's like running past. I don't know how they got there, because they're supposed to be at a party right now, but like, at least I know what's supposed to happen in the chapter. I can get them back to the party, you know, I can get back on track, but I can also wander a little bit and like learn more about the characters. So yeah, I would consider myself a planter. Most of the plotting takes place, you know, before I start the book, and then I get in there and I'm just like, oh, you know, what I just did was just a suggestion anyway.
It's always fun when you're writing and you're like, I've got a plan and this is how it's going to work and this character's going to do this, and you're doing it, and then you're like, that character would never do that.
Like, it doesn't
work.
What
was I thinking?
It really doesn't work.
And then you have to back up and start over or fix something. And that's always, you know, the thing for me is I get to a certain point, and if I can't get beyond that point, I'm like, oh, I messed up. And then I have to back up and figure it out. Do you, when you are writing, do you have like a playlist you listen to? Do you, I was gonna ask asked you like it's silent, but I guess not.
I make a playlist for every one of my books.
Oh, that's
They're
cool.
all on Spotify, which I will send you the link later. There is currently one up for So Let Them Burn, one up for the sequel, and one up for the Sinister Elite, which is my adult book that comes out in 2025. Love you, Lexi. But yeah, I think that I just need the music because it also helps me to brainstorm when I'm not actively writing, you know, like I will have that, like one of the songs on the So Let Them Burn playlist is Invisible String by Taylor Swift. And that one always reminds me of Signy and Alara because, you know, they are technically soulmates because they got bonded to the same dragon, so their souls are mated. So Invisible String, whenever I'm like on a train or something and listen to Invisible String, suddenly I'm brainstorming like more Alara and Signy. It just gets me right in the mood. So I need music, and I need music with lyrics. Yeah.
You know, sometimes I do silent just because music can be too much for me. But then other times I'll do music and the rhythm, the beat, you know, everything keeps me going. And keeps me in that kind of headspace and in that rhythm to be able to continue to get some words.
But does that change like chapter by chapter as you're writing, or like book by book? Like this book you wrote, did you write spellbound super silently and then you wrote otherworldly with music? Like how does that work for you?
I have no idea.
Like I wasn't there.
It depends on the day.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Is there any questions or anything you want to talk about that we haven't asked yet? Before we open it up to the room and to the online folks.
Actually, yes, because I just saw this, a tweet by Rosie Thor today about this, but a lot of people don't know that Theron, my main character, is demisexual. She is on the asexual spectrum, which means that her romance is a love triangle, but she does not know that because she's asexual. It takes her a really, really long time to even like think of people on that level, and it takes her a really, really long time to even like want to. She's demisexual particularly, so she doesn't have an emotional connection with someone. Like she physically cannot be attracted to them, and so it takes her a very long time to get to that point. And when she does, I think it's really cool.
It is.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. I think it's really cool, and that was really important to me because, well, sorry to call you out, Alex, but my editor, when I was writing the book, was like, can you add like, you know, more tension-filled scenes between Theron and spoiler, just to make really sure that the ending, like it hits. And I was like, I cannot, because she is unaware of the physicality of this boy until like probably around like the dance scene.
Yeah, that's like 3/4 of the way.
That's 3/4 of the way in, because they spent all of that time like really building their relationship and their connection, and Theron needed that before she was able to see him as someone who is someone that she could desire in that way. And doing that was really important to me because, you know, seeing someone who is Black and who is on the asexual spectrum is like still pretty rare for me. Like there are a lot of books there are some books that I've seen, but not a lot of fantasy books that I've seen. And yeah, so Let Them Burn is sapphic, but it's also important to me that you all know that, you know, one of the main characters is on the asexual spectrum. And yeah.
So to recap, So Let Them Burn has dragons and is queer.
So queer.
So
queer.
So. Okay, is there any questions in the room? Yes.
So one of my favorite parts of the magical building in this book is the connection to ancestry. So I would just love if you could talk a little bit about building that connection between people that we have lost and how their ties become magical physically.
lovely question. So yeah, so in San Irie, which is the Jamaican-inspired island in the book, they have summoning magic, which means that they can call on their ancestors, ancestral spirits, which are known as astrals, and use the power of their souls to do magic. And there's at one point in the book where Alara thinks about like the nature of grief and how it's different in San Irie, because you know they can still call on the people that they've lost, but at the same time it's not the person that they've lost, you know, it's just an echo of them. So it's like, you know, you won't remember like what your grandmother's like, the feeling of your grandmother's like fingers in your hair, or like, you know, being able to talk to them, because you really can't, like they're just like an echo that's here to help you. So their grief is different because they can still see their family members technically whenever they want, but like they also can't. So in Afro-Caribbean religions and culture, like ancestral worship and respect for your elders is such a huge thing. So when I was doing So Let Them Burn, I knew that the magic system, I wanted it to be related to ancestors, because our ancestors, I'm saying our, but I just like mean for all kinds of Black culture, so important to us, because you know we are here today because of their sacrifices, because of their suffering, because of how they changed the world in large and small ways to make it better for us. You know, there was a time when I would literally not be allowed to be sitting next to you right now, and that was because my ancestors like took those hits for me. And as a Black woman, it is always important to me to like take those hits for the next generation, you know, like just to leave the world better and stronger, and like encourage more people who look like me to do their best and do whatever they want to in this world. So that's why adding ancestral spirits as a resource was so important to me, because even now, you know, like I think of like my grandmother who always used to like make me fried fish, or I think of like my grandpa and how we'd sit on the porch for like hours and just like talk about nothing, and like I would do anything to get those days back. I would do anything to be able to like summon him and ask him for, you know, his help. So that was really for me. But it was also to pay respect to Afro-Caribbean ancestor worship as well. Did I answer the question? Okay. Thank you. Anyone else? Hi, Stephanie.
Yes.
Hi, so I'm a proxy for our online audience, and we have a question from Grace, who says, I wanted to know what your favorite, Kamilah, what your favorite moment in the novel was to write, and what you think most readers' favorite moment will be, and whether they're different.
Good question. So I really liked writing Alara as a useless lesbian. There are several points in the novel when Alara will see a beautiful girl and just go, oh no. And I found that so relatable. So I just always like, I would be writing like, so I really love doing that. But my favorite scene is actually the scene that takes place on the beach, where Farron's basically sitting on the beach and she's eating a bowl of Ginnip, and Reeve joins her, and they have probably one of the longest conversations they've ever had in their entire lives that wasn't actively hostile. I really liked writing that because it was like, it was just a super soft moment, like, and she's feeling particularly vulnerable and in multitude of ways. And she's not somebody who does soft very often or very openly. And I always love writing like a different side of a character like that, and like the potential of like various things that happen in that moment is like really my favorite. As for what the reader's favorite might be, you know, I don't know, because all anybody does is yell at me about the ending. So I'm like, what do you like? FT, what do you like?
It is the moment before they board the Drake.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Ooh.
I think readers are going to enjoy that scene and that moment. And there was a scene that is kind of around that moment where I actually got a little mad at you.
I didn't do anything. I want to be clear, I've done nothing wrong in my whole life.
It was, and I'm not going to spoil anything for anyone because it's towards the end of the book, but those some characters kind of come back. And I really enjoyed that moment until I didn't.
Read the book. But I will say about that moment,
Which
before
one?
they board the good one,
the good one,
the
okay.
good one before they board the Drake was heavily inspired by New Girl, actually.
Oh,
Yes,
I
you know,
see that.
yes, like there's a very famous scene in New Girl between two characters. I cannot say any more than that because
No.
it will spoil the scene.
Yes.
But I was literally, I watched that maybe like 50 times and I was like, how do I do that? So that's what I did. Read the book. Yeah.
Yes.
Is there like any element from previous drafts that you really wish you could have kept in? Like kind of like
Ooh.
that's a good artist moment.
Ooh, that is a good question.
Can you repeat the question just because back here, I think that at home.
So the question was, were there any moments or any aspects of one of the earlier drafts that didn't make it into this book, the final draft, that Kamilah would want to keep?
No. Like I'm going through the deleted scenes in my head, and honestly, I do feel like they were all deleted for a reason, unless you want to throw it like all the way back to like when this book still had like 4 POVs, because like for some reason, at one point, the queen hired a mercenary group to be Theron's bodyguards. Don't ask me why. And they were called the Crimson Blades. And so now I really want to make use of the name Crimson Blades for a mercenary group because I thought that was really good. But yeah, I would not put that back in because why?
Yes, we have another question from the at-home audience, and it actually has to do with POV. So perfect segue. And they're asking, which was the easier or harder POV to write?
Theron was easier because I relate to Alara more, which made her story like really hard to get right. Because like Alara, I had elder sibling trauma, and Alara needed a plot besides that, so I couldn't just sit there going, and then my parents wanted so much from me. Like, you know, she needed to be doing stuff. So Theron was easier to write because like she's really simple, like 2 roads diverge in a wood, and this one's bad, this one's good, she's going that way. She makes plot happen. Alara's plot changed several times to get to be where was now. Things moved around. At first she wasn't spying, and then she was, and then she was trying harder to spy, and then she wasn't. There was more school stuff involved, but it was taking away from the politics, so I had to like it was really hard to balance politics and the dragon writing school, and also her falling in love, and also her learning more about like the other people in Langley who also hated the war. Like her story, I feel, had a lot of elements going on in the present, whereas Theron was reeling from the past. So it was a lot harder to balance Alara's things than it was for Theron. Yeah.
One of the things that out of your answer just reminded me that Theron, even though she is a chosen one, she and this is one of her struggles, is trying to find her agency.
Mm-hmm.
And that really pushed that plot along and pushed her arc along, was her making decisions that maybe weren't the best, but it was the only way she had agency.
Yeah.
And I thought that really struck me as I was reading, because one of the things that you know, when you're writing and when you're an author, is like making sure your characters are making choices and have agency, and the plot's just not pulling a character along.
Mhm.
But Farron is making the plot happen.
Literally making the plot happen. I think that Farron's just stuck in a state of arrested development. You know, she has heavy PTSD from the war. She is a weapon with no war left to fight. There's no one to wield her, which means that she has to, you know, figure out for herself what her blade is for, and she doesn't know. So I feel like a lot of her bad decisions are her just like kind of like cutting things and seeing what's the right thing to cut, and just, you know, not really moving on from what happened to her, which comes out in self-destructive and paranoid ways that end up pushing people further away from her. But at the same time, I just think that like she's just so young and she's doing her best, and she's really really trying to take control of who she is and what she wants. And that means she's dumb a lot, but like but I think she needs to be in order to find her way. So I hope that, you know, readers can be patient with her on that.
Are there any other questions? We have like time for one more, maybe.
I do have one online if there's not one here, but we'll go to the. All right, last one will be from our at-home audience. Gabriel says, now that your book is published and out in the world, what does literary success look like to you?
Ooh, what a
Wow,
great
some
last. I know.
deep questions going on.
That's so deep. Honestly, for me, like, and this is gonna sound like so dumb, but like I feel like I've already been successful, because as I said, like I've been dreaming of being published since I was a kid, but I never finished anything. And when I did finish stuff, like I didn't want to show it to anyone, you know. And not only did I manage to do that, I managed to get an agent, I managed to get a book deal. Like I remember when I signed with my agent and we got on a call like a few weeks after I signed with her, and she was like, all right, like I'm here to help you in your career, so like tell me what you want and I'm gonna figure out how we can get you what you want. And I was like, this is what I want. Like, I had no dream of anything coming after that, like not even the book deal. I didn't get that far. So for me, I've already been a success, because just being able to sit here with an author talking about a book that I wrote that you can buy in a store, like that's my idea of literary success, because this just seemed so impossible to me when I was still in my 20s. It felt like I was running out of time because of that like stupid societal expectation that every cool thing that's ever happened to you is going to happen to you when you are in your teens or in your 20s. And I'm like 33 now and I am living my best life. Like every cool thing happened to me in my 30s. So I just think that like I already feel like I'm a success. I'm really grateful that you guys are buying my book. Please buy my book. But like, I want you to buy my book, like for me, obviously, and so I can buy my cat new toys, but also for my team that works so hard on promoting it, for my agent, who is the best, worst person ever, and for young me, who really never thought I'd see this happen. But as far as literary success on my own merits, like I did it already. I did this. Like,
And just a reminder, you know, purchasing the book, word of mouth is great. Recommending it to friends, requesting it from your library. All of those things really help the author.
Yeah. So please buy Spellbound and please like talk about and request at the library FT's upcoming book, Otherworldly. Like let's hear it for FT. Come on. See, it's not so great.
I think we're good. If you just, if you have any final thoughts before we say goodnight to everybody.
Buy my book.
Thank you for everyone that came out. Thank you, virtual audience. Very pleased to be here supporting this wonderful person in this great debut. And again, if you can purchase, but also requesting from the library, and talking about it on social media and those kinds of things really do help. So thank you all for coming.
Thank you.